The Grand Chess Tour Rapid and Blitz tournament in Zagreb is now over. Magnus Carlsen was the winner of the Blitz tournament. He just kept his nose ahead, and he was also the overall winner of the two tournaments, the Rapid and the Blitz combined. Carlsen didn't have the best day. He only scored 5 out of 9 in the Blitz, but as he said, when nobody else has a great performance, my B game is usually enough. Always striving for more though. Yeah, it was good enough. Now, I don't want to give another game by Carlsen. I'd prefer to spread the love, particularly as he didn't have a brilliant second Blitz day. So I'm going to look at 2 games. One played by Wesley So, who came in joint second in the Blitz with Abdusattorov. And I want to show a game by Abdusattorov as well. So, okay, let's start with Caruana against So. This was played in the final round, and Fabiano Caruana has white here. He's a pawn up. Wesley So has black. Now, let's just take a look at the 2 kings. Black's is far more secure than white's, and very often in chess, in classical chess, and especially in faster time controls, that is significant. But the queen is covering the king very well, as does the bishop. So it's not a big deal at the moment. Caruana, a safe pawn up. Everything's protected. That pawn protects that beautiful knight on c4. But Wesley played a very practical move here. He simply sacrificed the exchange, getting rid of that strong knight and allowing the rook to break through to the second rank. Now, this is already absolutely terrifying. The computer says that white is still okay here, but this is excellent compensation. So the king stepped back before some horrible check happens. Queen takes c4. I should say that if you're looking at this with an engine, then you know the dial, the assessment dial, kind of flickered one way and the other here. But I think the overall trend is this is extremely dangerous for white because of the open king. If that queen moves away from the diagonal, you can see, then there'll be a deadly check on d5. So just bear that in mind over the next few moves. And this knight is pretty good. And as I said before, it's impossible to get a hit against black's king. So this is how the game progressed. Black's pieces still looking good. That pawn looks very strong indeed. And white's rooks are split. That's not very nice. And this is a crunch moment. I mean, maybe I should hand it over to you already. If you were playing black, what would you do here? There's more than one very good move here. So black to play. You have a think, I'll have a drink. Cheers. Actually, while you're thinking, and I'll have a quick drink first. Just a quick reminder that my next live masterclass will take place on Friday evening at 8 p.m. UK time. And that's exclusive for patrons. So if you want to sign up, subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, do check it out. And then you can join in the fun. And, you know, it all takes place on Zoom, so you can ask me direct questions. It's a really nice session, really nice group. And, well, do join me. So, what are your thoughts here? Black to play. Well, Wesley made a mistake here. He played queen c6. Queen b7 is a strong move, so that's a nice pin. And if rook e3, protecting the queen, then queen b2, and this is very powerful. This rook is hit, this rook is hit, and black is doing extremely well here. So, for example, after rook takes, rook d3, rook e1, white is really weak on the first rank, and this should be winning for black. Okay, let's go back. Wesley played queen c6, blunder. Because now after rook e3, well, black does not want to exchange because this is unstable. After d2, in fact, rook d1, this is better for white. So Wesley played queen b5. And then simply rook takes d3, and the game has turned in white's favour. Caruana is now winning. Yeah, this rook is very unfortunately placed now. So it went knight e1. Queen takes rook. Knight takes d3 and rook a1. So the rook reaches a great square behind that pawn. And Wesley now plays a superb move. I think, in Blitz, you have to keep things as complicated as possible. If, for example, black played queen a6, blocking that pawn, then h4, and then king h2, and I think the danger has passed for white here. There's no more threats on that long diagonal, and little by little, I think, or even very quickly, after king h2, there's a pin here. It's going to be winning for white. So Wesley played h4. Good try. It just kind of complicates things. And after a6, yeah, Fabiano went for it. h3. So that really raises the stakes with that pawn on h3. But that pawn is flying. So queen d5 and mate is threatened. So therefore queen f3. Caruana still has things under control. Queen b2. And this is a crunch moment in the game. Fabiano played a7. We'll look at that in a second. Rook f1 should be played, for example, and that pawn is just going to march through. Even here, it still could be tricky. For example, queen here, a7, and knight e1. That's a really tricky move, threatening queen g2. But in fact, you can get a queen and white is a rook up here. Point is that the new queen and the old queen cover g2, so there's no queen g2 mate. It's still possible to blunder in this position. For example, after rook takes, queen takes, white gets a new queen, and then bishop c5. Incredibly, there's no good defense here, even though white is a queen up. I say there's no good defense. Of course, white can make a draw with this move, but this is hardly a triumph and a draw by perpetual. So it just shows you all the kinds of tricks in this position. Fabiano played a7. He thought he was winning, but after this, in fact, he's losing. Incredible. Here he played queen e3. Now, I didn't see this game live, so I'm assuming he simply lost on time here. But black is winning after bishop c5. That's a deadly move. A very nasty skewer. Instead, if white makes a queen, if Fabiano made a queen, then knight f2 check, queen takes queen, and mate on the long diagonal. I mean, that's an incredible finish. And yes, if queen takes knight, then bishop c5 is also winning. It's incredible. The mating nets that are set up, not just on the long diagonal, but on the first rank as well. So what a turnaround. Let's just go through that. So a7, blunder, queen takes rook, and black is winning. And that's the end of the game. Amazing stuff. But well played to Wesley So for keeping the game alive in this position, recognising that h4 was his only chance. Really fascinating stuff. So yeah, Wesley came in equal second. Now I want to show you the game between Norbek Abdusattorov and Anish Giri. Abdusattorov had an excellent second Blitz day, scored 7 out of 9. Actually, he lost in the last round, which is rather unfortunate, but he still came in second. Yeah, he could have actually won the Blitz. So here we go. Abdusattorov, white against Anish Giri. e4, c5 and bishop b5 check. That's very much a blitz move. You just get your pieces out quickly. And c4, okay, they're a little quirky variation, inviting black to take on b5, but knight f6, knight c3, and it's going to turn into a kind of Marozzi bind position. Now, the regular move here is knight takes d4 and then knight c6 and so on. But Abdusattorov plays queen d4, and there's quite a trend in Sicilians at the moment to play this early queen takes d4. For example, even in this position, a lot of players are experimenting with this, and then either queen d3 or queen e3. It's extraordinary. And then just playing the knights out to their best squares. So, yeah, definite trend. Knight c6, queen d3. And the point is that with the knight on f3 rather than d4, well, it puts the knight out of any danger here. But also the knight covers the e5 square. And very often, white wants to put that knight on d5. And after the exchange, open up the e-file. So, for example, there's a game between Caruana and Mishra, St. Louis 2023, that went bishop g7 and then knight d5. So this is typical. So perhaps, I mean, obviously there's a threat to play knight b6 here, but I mean, regardless of that, the idea is to try and provoke e6 and then get some play here. Or if that's exchanged off, then the e-file opens and there's potential pressure here. But Giri played knight g4. Castles, bishop g7, bishop d2. So it's simply connecting the rooks in a very unpretentious way. b3, supporting the c-pawn. And white would simply like to put the rooks in the middle and plonk the knight on d5. But Giri plays f5. You know, that's a disturbing move, trying to, break up white's centre. This was taken. Now I think that rook takes is the best idea. Looking to bring the second rook over and, perhaps try and create some play on the king side. I think certainly in a blitz game, that has to be the right way to go. It's a very active move. But Giri exchanged queens, and I feel this plays into white's hands. G takes f5. You could argue that black has the majority of pawns in the centre. Positionally, that can be quite nice, particularly if they're rolling down the board. But actually, they're quite unstable. Because at some point, there's going to be pressure on e7, or perhaps a knight might like to invade on e6. And then it's going to feel right to advance that pawn to either e6 or e5, but then that weakens the d6 pawn. So I think, if you had lots of time, then it's possible to play like this. But in a blitz game, I think it's just much easier for white to play than black. These pawns are just a little bit delicate. So rook d1, simple plan, put the rooks in the middle. h6, Giri is obviously concerned potentially about a knight coming in here. Knight d5, excellent move. And now, the move we would like to play as black, e6, will be met by knight c7, hitting rook, hitting e6 and rook e8 not possible. And even rook e8 here, defending that pawn. Then the knight hops in and knight e6. Not very pleasant for black. And what about e5? Well, then knight h4. And this pawn is a little bit sensitive. And, you know, there's potential to leap into g6 as well. That's the problem with h6. Not a beautiful move. So Giri played king f7, looking to protect the pawns. You know, maybe he's got the idea at some moment to play e6 and then move the king in the middle to stabilize those pawns, protect the pawns. Rook e1, but it's not an easy position for black. Whereas, you know, white's pieces are so well coordinated, they're really harmoniously placed. Knight f4. Well, that's a clear idea. Leap into that beautiful square on e6. Knight e5 stops that. But now knight h4. Excellent move. You know, these knights, they tread on each other's toes. White's knight's looking excellent here. Looking at some really key squares in the position. f5 as well. e6. Knight h5. This is very awkward for black. It's not nice to have that bishop under fire. And, you know, potentially there's f4, removing the knight. And then, you know, the e6 pawn is vulnerable. Beautiful knights on the edge of the board, actually. There's the exception that proves the rule. Bishop h8 played, and bishop takes h6. I mean, this is really funny with these minor pieces on the h file, but actually they're untouchable. Rook d8, h3, very careful move, preventing knight g4. Rook d7, yeah, I mean this rook is protecting the pawn on d6, but shows, you know, those centre pawns are vulnerable. f4, booting the knight out of the way. Now, I mean, this knight could just come back to f3 and leap in here, but Abdusattorov spots a very nice idea. And this is great for a blitz game. I should mention the time control is 5 minutes plus 2 seconds increment per move. Knight g6. And rook takes pawn check, giving up the knight on h5. But white has a wonderful initiative here. Bishop g5 threatening rook h6. So the bishop defends the h6 square, but then rook d5. Great move. Well spotted by Abdusattorov. Because if rook f8, defending the f pawn, then rook takes pawn and g4 mate. Very nice. And Giri is in massive trouble here. He played knight e5. Bishop e7 played. There's, I mean, this is falling. I mean, this knight is in trouble. And g4 check just ramps up the pressure. Opens up, opens up the 5th rank, g4. So yes, if this is taken, then of course that could be taken. And rook takes rook, white is just a piece up. So pawn takes pawn. E takes d6, check, king g4 and rook g6 check, which wins the bishop on g7, and well, black's king looks in terrible trouble as well. Really nice game from Abdusattorov. You know, that's a blitz game. He saw a great deal, but I think in general, he got a very pleasant position to play. You know, when you're playing blitz, you want to find easy moves. You don't want to put yourself under pressure. And basically, white was under no pressure in that game at all. Giri didn't find a moment to kind of change the nature of the position. So, excellent game from Abdusattorov, and as I said, he scored 7 out of 9. Let's just have a quick look at those final standings again. Magnus Carlsen won the Blitz with 12.5. Wesley So, Nordebek Abdusattorov on 12 points. And Gukesh right at the bottom with 5.5. Blitz is really not his thing. Hope you enjoyed the coverage. Hopefully see you soon on the channel. Thanks for watching.